All right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So this is the TripleO project update. So like all the OpenStack projects, they make a presentation about the roadmap, the things that we have done in Pike, and the things we plan to do in Queens and beyond. So if you are interested by what's happening in OpenStack, it's a good session to understand. So today this is about TripleO. Thank you for being interested by the roadmap. My name is Emilia Maki. I was the PTL before, and I'm involved in TripleO for some time now. Steve is working with me as well. We both work on the TripleO project on full time, and we are going to present you what we are working on and what's the next step. This is like at the end we will have time for questions. If you have any question about some things we said and you want more details, or if you have any questions about the roadmap or feedback to give, it's a very good opportunity to do it. So hi, this is TripleO team at the PTG working hard on trying to find out what we do in the Queen cycle. So we met, and I will talk about Queens later, but first of all, what's TripleO? This is like a very quick introduction. I'm not going to go in details, but if you don't know what's TripleO, this is not just an installer. This is a project that aims to install and also to operate and upgrade OpenStack in production. So one of the particularities of TripleO is that we use the OpenStack APIs to control some resources. So including Heat, Ironic, Nova, Keystone, and so on. So that's the official logo, which is awesome, right? What a deployment looks like with TripleO. So by the way, this morning, Steve Hardy made a very great presentation about how TripleO is working. And this is I think this is more details that what I'm presenting right now. This is just like a high level. And if you want to go through details about how it works, I suggest you to look at the presentation later on YouTube. So this is what it looks like when you deploy TripleO. You have this orchestration layer that will deploy your infrastructure as a service for you. So we use different technologies like OpenStack Heat, Ansible, controlling Docker and Puppet, so we can manage the configuration for all these OpenStack services. We know that OpenStack can be complex to deploy, so we provide this logic for the operators so they can compose and deploy their own infrastructure. TripleO, so this is about infrastructure. We don't control the application on top of the infrastructure, right? So this is about planning, deploying, and then the operation. So when you want to plan your deployment, you want to prepare your network topology. So we will talk later about how the composable networks can work for you. We talk about TripleO is able to configure the services that fits with different use cases. So you can set some parameters, and TripleO will configure the OpenStack services for your use case. So we can deploy different Neutron plugins or Cinder backends, etc. So that's all in parameters. We also manage the resources, the physical nodes with Ironic. So that's something that usually we do before the deployments. And during the deployment stage, we have the validation that makes sure that your networking is correctly working. So we don't go through the deployments when it's not working yet. We have some orchestration that takes care of the stepwise deployments. So the step deployment is to deploy services in different steps. So for example, the first step are more for the common services like the the RabbitMQ, MySQL, and all the clustering things that happened at the very beginning. And then TripleO moves on with the OpenStack services, the APIs, the scheduler, and so on. So that's kind of approach that we took a few years ago, and we are still working on this model right now. And the last thing we do for the deployment is to manage this complex configuration for OpenStack. So right now we use the OpenStack Puppet modules, and we will see a bit later what we are looking at for the future. But this is how it works right now. And at the end, like I said, TripleO is just not, it's not just an installer. It's also about operations. And what do you do on the day 2 operations? So you want to scale your infrastructure, you want to add more compute nodes, or you want to extend your controllers. That's something that TripleO is taking care of. One of the biggest things that the team is working on lately is the upgrade process. So how can you upgrade your OpenStack cloud and try to reduce the control plane downtime so you can have efficient upgrades controlled by TripleO, and also that you can control from the operator side. And it's the same thing for the minor updates. So Steve is going to talk about the things we did in Pike.
Yeah, so I apologize. You'll have to do a context switch from a French accent to a New Zealand accent, but, and back again. So I'm just going to go through some features from the Pike release. Our biggest effort in this cycle has been the containerizing OpenStack effort. Steve Hardy went into that in some detail in his talk, so if you weren't there, I'd definitely recommend watching it on YouTube, because when it's published. But I'll give you an overview of what the containerizing process was, where we're consuming images that are built with the Cola build system. We do have some customizations. You know, it's mostly sort of RDO, repo cleanup, you know, swapping out EPEL for different packages. There's some customizations for each service has its own, for example, their own health check script, which allows us to integrate health checks for running containers. So it's things like that. So it's, you know, the vast majority is vanilla Cola. And when we're deploying those images, the orchestration component, it's represented in heat data. The orchestration itself is triggered by Ansible, and Ansible is invoking a tool called Paunch, which was written for our particular containerization orchestration needs. It's a fairly simple library. It takes some YAML and runs some containers, and that's very much it. So where we're at now, we have containerized every service. However, there's caveats to that. There might be scenarios where, for whatever reason, you can't or don't want to run a service containerized in your overcloud. So in that case, you do have the choice still of choosing exactly which services are containerized and which are still running on the bare metal. So that's going to, you know, provide some flexibility with upgrades if you want to take a more gradual approach. And probably the most common reason for wanting to leave a service on bare metal would be, say, having drivers that aren't included upstream for services like Neutron and Cinder and Manila. If you don't have a driver upstream, then it won't be packaged in the container. So then your choice is either you can't run it containerized, or you are building your own image building pipeline, which can constantly regenerate a customized image whenever something is published upstream. And you know, there will be options if you really don't want to build your own image building pipeline. If you talk to your local friendly OpenStack vendor, then there might be some solutions there. But it is just a reality of moving into the container world instead of the RPM-driven packaging. So a really important thing that we strive for is not breaking our customization interfaces between releases. So that puts some constraints on our container architecture in this release. But we've managed to do it by we're still using Puppet to generate the actual configuration files, but not for the rest of the service management that Puppet used to do in the bare metal case. So Puppet's actually run within the containers when you deploy, and it means we can preserve our customization interfaces like the Hira data and the heat template sort of extension points that we already have. So another reality of a containerized overcloud is that you're going to have to get your images from somewhere. Ideally, from a networking point of view, it'll be somewhere close to the overcloud, so you're not pulling the same content repeatedly over a long, slow, unreliable link. So you have the option of running an image registry on the undercloud or configuring your own. And then you need some kind of tooling to make sure the right images are in the right place at the right time for the deploy to actually happen. So there's a few workflow commands that have been implemented at the pre-deploy phase, so that you can manage your container images. Upgrades. Running everything in containers, it's a big change, but we are committed to having upgrade paths from previous clouds without having to reinstall from scratch. So our solution here is to have some upgrade Ansible instructions maintained in the same file as all of the other configuration for the service. So it's in a nice YAML format. So it allows us to transparently upgrade from bare metal to containerized in the first upgrade stack operation. And in many cases, those scripts are as simple as stop the system deservice, disable the system deservice, and that's it, because the next stage is the general containerized provisioning process. So nothing special has to happen. And I guess another thing worth mentioning is, I've had HA managed via Pacemaker. Pacemaker is still running as a bare metal service, but it's now managing containers instead of the services as they were before. So that's enough about new container features. There's as always, a bunch of other stuff that's landed as well. One is composable networks. So I suspect this is an accurate thing to say, but probably most customizations in the field happen in the networking architecture. That's where there's the most variety in real-world deployments. So we needed a way of having a more expressive, powerful way of specifying a particular networking architecture that you're deploying into. And composable networks is our solution for that. Another feature that's now complete is now possible to deploy a fully TLS-enabled overcloud. So all the services are properly behind a secure channel. It's still not enabled by default, but it's complete. There's been the usual. There's more back-end drivers support for Neutron, Manila, and Cinder. That's, as I said before. If the driver gets an upstream, everything becomes easier everywhere else. There's improvement for DBDK support in OVS. And the CI coverage. So as you can imagine, the testing matrix for something which deploys OpenStack and has so many options, it's impossibly vast. And the way we've mitigated that, we have in CI, we have things called feature sets and things called scenarios where we can come up with a a sparse matrix of combinations of things we're going to test together, so we get some coverage in the handful of CI jobs that we can run in various scenarios, because we have constraints on how many CI jobs. OpenStack Infra start to get a little grumpy if we use all of them, which is fair enough. Another thing that's been coming along really nicely is the UI. We have plans in the future to make sure the UI and the CLI have feature parity. And so I'm just going to click through some screenshots of where the UI is at the moment. There on the left, you can see there's a node management interface, so you can drive the introspection and registration and control the nodes before a deployment. And if you look on the right there, you'll see there's some validation scripts, and I think this is a real advantage of the UI, where this collection of validation scripts is very easily discoverable. Under the hood, all they are Ansible playbooks, and they go away and do something on your cloud and give you results to give you certainty that your nodes are in the right state for whatever you're about to do. And you can see there's they're organized by tags, so they tell you what phase of deployment you might want to run these, prep or pre-deployment or pre-upgrade. And because they're just Ansible playbooks, if you have ones that you want to write yourself, it's perfectly easy to customize them and have them always available. And here's the plans. The UI has a concept of a plan, which is the collection of files that specify absolutely everything you need to deploy your overcloud. So we have a flow after you've registered the nodes. You can customize the configuration at step 2. Step 3, you can scale up or scale down, choose how many nodes you're going to deploy. And then step 4 is push the big green button and make things happen. So that's a quick roundup of things happening in Pike. Now, Emilian is going to talk about what we're working on currently in Queens.
So like Steve said, the main topic for Pike was the containerization, but it was like a huge challenge to achieve that in less than 6 months. And one of the big things we want to do in Queens is the stabilization of what we did in the last 6 months. It means finish some work done on the Docker CMD-based implementation for Pike. We want to finish some work here. So Steve mentioned about the Cinder, Neutron, and Manila that are not supported in containers yet. That's something we want to do in Queens. There is also the undercloud that we would like to containerize. We have some ongoing work right now to move the default to deploy the undercloud from Ansible in containers by using the exact same configuration for the overcloud. So we think that's something that has a good value for both the developers and the users. We are going to work on this topic. More Ansible. That's also a second major topic for us. We would like to think about migrating some resources usually managed by HIT and migrating those resources in Ansible task that we could run either in Mistral workflow or from the operators could run themselves the tasks instead of relying on the OS collect config. So that's something right now we are looking at. It's called the config download thing that we are working on, trying to see how we can generate those tasks and execute the Ansible task. There are different cases right now where we are experimenting, but I will mention that a bit later. So yeah, this is like the next step for split stack. If you're familiar with split stack, this is the next step for us, is looking at how we can continue to break down the deployments for the operator so they can rerun again the steps manually, or they can just rely on the Mistral workflow. So that's something very interesting. You could imagine running any Ansible playbooks from TripleO. So if you want to deploy something like Kubernetes or anything like that we will use Ansible, you can think about TripleO controlling this task actually. The last thing is the CLI and UI parity. The UI team is working on controlling and all the actions in the Mistral workflow from both the CLI and the UI. And the last thing was the composable network architecture that you could control from the UI. So that's also something that we target for Queens. And in Queens and beyond, we are also investigating the Kubernetes integrations. So the Kubernetes integration, we have a lot of questions from the community about how this is going to happen. And right now, there are some investigation on that aspect. And there are two things we need to think about. The first one is how can we deploy Kubernetes on top of OpenStack? And the second thing is how can we deploy OpenStack in Kubernetes microservices? So that's something the team is currently investigating. There is nothing we commit to do in Queens, but we are working on for the long-term roadmap on this thing. And you can follow the mailing list about this. We are doing the design at this time, and this is like happening right now. We also have collaboration with other deployment projects. We are collaborating with Cola. We are collaborating with the whole working group, usually trying to resolve the same challenges together. So that's pretty cool. We have a discussion this week about the stable release management for the installers. So that's also something we are looking at, is how can we provide the right stable policy for the operators and the deployment tools. That's something we are looking at. The composable networks was done in Pike, as we said, but we are also looking at improving the usability of this feature in Queens and beyond, as well as the spinal leaf deployment. That's something that is ongoing. We don't know if we will commit that in Queens, but that's something that's part of the roadmap. We are looking at enabling the rolling upgrades for services that are capable of doing this. And the last thing is looking at a potential new architecture of TripleO Lit. And it will be like a light version of TripleO to deploy just a basic set of services, and on top you would have something like Kubernetes, or So we are looking at a very light version of TripleO, just useful to deploy something else like Kubernetes. This is some areas of investigation right now, and this is like some blueprints that people are looking at, and most of this work won't land in Queens, because the main focus again is stabilization and finish some work that we did in Pike. But we hope to make good progress over the next 2 cycles.
Okay, so when the TripleO project was started, one of the motivations for trying to reuse the OpenStack projects to deploy OpenStack itself was to maximize the amount of cooperation between projects and to have shared effort on common code. So many things have happened since then, but the goal remains the same, and it's worth now sort of revisiting where we can put our effort into these sort of cross-project shared work where other projects can benefit from what we're doing. So there's a few broad themes. You know, containers. Obviously, you know, we're consuming community container project, and you know, as we go on, you know, things can be pushed upstream to Cola when it makes sense and when it can benefit other Cola users. In the Ansible area, so as we start to ramp up on doing things with Ansible, you know, there's a chance to have some shared standalone common roles that do common tasks that can be shared by other projects. You know, same goes for configuration. It's a general problem. You know, everyone's containerizing their OpenStack deployments. There's potential here to come up with some best practices for some standardized ways of configuring the containers for the services that you run. You know, and again with orchestration, you know, industry seems to be converging on Kubernetes as the way that our clouds are going to be managed. So we can help in that case by sharing our Kubernetes templates in a way that can benefit not just TripleO but you know, other Kubernetes deploying operators. And finally, regarding release management, so the stable policy tag is intended to be something desirable by, you know, the services projects, the Nova and whatnot, to say, if you claim that you're a stable project, then you will abide by these rules when you're deciding what bugs are justifiably backportable. And the rules are perfectly appropriate for a service-based project, but not so much for a deployment tool. You know, it's potentially a little bit more liberal about, you know, what we should backport, because, you know, upgrade work is ongoing, and sometimes, you know, upgrade work needs things that happen several releases before to be backported before you can go forward again. So, you know, we're going to have a discussion. I think there's a session this afternoon. There's a forum session about this from the operator point of view, about whether, you know, we can elaborate on what tags we will define for stable releases. So that's another area where, you know, once we come up with this definition, then any of the deployment projects could apply for it, and, you know, they'll be the same situation.
Right. There is also something else I didn't add in the slide. I missed it, but that's also in Queens we are looking for trying to reduce the footprint in OpenStack infra, and this is pretty huge right now. I know that we are running many CI jobs, and that's painful if we want to merge code quickly. So we acknowledge that, and we are working, like, the next steps are probably try to reduce the CI jobs, trying to, like, optimize what we are testing. And so basically the background was moving to containers. We wanted more CI and make sure we don't break like deployments and test all the things, basically. And now we found out that we basically just, like, we are just burning out of resources to maintain all those jobs, and we are consuming so many resources. So this is something we are looking at in the next, like, we are looking at right now, and we are investigating how to reduce this pain point, I guess, and without decreasing the number of tests. So if you want to learn and contribute to TripleO, we have an onboarding session just after in 40 minutes. You're welcome to join. There is no slide. There is no formal agenda. You just come with your own topics. Another way to get involved is the OpenStack mailing list. We have the TripleO tag that you can use for asking any questions or feedback to the community. There is the TripleO channel on IRC that you're welcome to join. One big update for us this cycle is we have some contributors outside of Red Hat, which is kind of cool, I think. We all know that TripleO is mainly maintained by Red Hat, and I find it cool that we finally have contributors from outside. They come up on the TripleO channel. They start with basic questions, and after a few weeks, they are like contributing and part of the team. So that's very cool, and you're welcome to join if you feel like you have some things to bring, like feedback, or you just want to contribute. We also plan to have a TripleO room at the next PTG. So if you want to be more involved in the development, we usually use the PTG for doing design together. And it's a good time to meet together face-to-face, doing some design, code, and hacking. And like it's a good time. There is a documentation. There is a link you can follow. And that's I guess, a good place to start in TripleO, where we try to document the basic things for how to get involved in TripleO. If you have if you are interested by TripleO or OpenStack, how to contribute, we have this onboarding session. Please join us. That would be cool. And at the end of the session, now we can go for the questions. If you have any questions or feedback for us, we also have TripleO people in the room, so we can cover a lot of topics here. So yeah, thanks for your time, and if you have any questions, please go ahead. We have 8 minutes. Yeah.
Do you know if it's possible to create or import new roles into the UI?
OK, so
yes.
The question is, I repeat the questions for the record. So the question is if we can import new roles from the UI. OK, that's a good question.
It's a work in progress.
OK, it's work in progress. OK.
Queens, we're planning to be able to select.
Do we have a microphone, maybe? Or?
I have a microphone.
Thanks.
Is this working?
Yep.
Yeah, OK. So for Queens, we're planning to introduce a functionality where you can basically select from a list of predefined roles which you want to use for the deployment. So you don't need to specify this in the plan. The defining of a new role involves creating of template. So it's kind of a we don't have this in the UI currently, so that's not even the plan, because basically it involves defining a new template. So you still have to do this manual work anyway. So
OK, you will have to create the templates yourself and then import in the UI, right? OK.
Yeah.
OK. Yep. You go. Hey.
So in regards to the more Ansible things, so question 1, so what are the main pain points that you are finding on that work? Where are you tracking that? And just to say that I'm here, whether you need help, because I can just look at things.
Yeah, that's very cool. So I will reply to the second question, maybe. Every pain point we have, usually it's happening on the mailing lists, or in Gerrit, or in the bugs. We don't have like private channels for.
So it's not like you have a special other path for Ansible, TripleO, whatever. It's just that you use Launchpad and bugs.
Yeah,
and
we
stuff.
have blueprints mainly. So as far I can tell, and Steve, maybe I missed something, but we have 2 major blueprints. One for the upgrades and another one for like the config download thing that we are doing now. The Ansible-ize the hit resources into Ansible task. So that's the main thing we are working on right now.
Yes. And probably our biggest pain point is fully self-inflicted, because we're invoking Ansible in 3 different ways at the moment in Pike. But the config download mechanism will allow us to extract all the Ansible in one hit and then run that inside a Mistral workflow, and that will make things a bit more maintainable.
One of the things I've noticed sometimes is Ansible upgrades kind of breakers most of the times.
That's why I'm asking.
That's a pain point, yeah, for us. Like the latest tag brokers, I remember the previous one brokers as well. So I'm wondering how we could have some like testing upfront with the new version, like from master maybe without the, like without testing the stable version, we could test TripleO with the latest commit in master and see how it works.
So what I'm not familiar is what kind of Ansible use you do in TripleO. So do you use it just for driving deployment, or you use the OpenStack Ansible modules themselves also to
No, we
create
don't use
resources?
the OpenStack Ansible, no.
But just for
But
driving workflows?
That'll be remaining in heat for the foreseeable, the actual.
Okay, so that's going to stay in heat.
Yeah. So it's just all the software configuration part of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So two more things I'll add. The way it's related to the one. The way we call Ansible is we actually exec it as a CLI, I believe. It would be pretty cool to be able to use it as a Python library to call it, like the way where we call Ansible via Mistral. So like, and we were actually, I think we reached out to some Ansible folk and we were advised not to use the Python interface because it wasn't guaranteed to be stable.
Oh yeah, I mean, I can have a look at that.
Yeah. So having like a stable Python way to execute it would be, just a minor improvement. The other thing is parameters in Ansible. Like heat has proper typed parameters, and it's one of the features that we benefit from greatly in the way that we're generating our Ansible. We take heat templates, and we can rely on heat to check those parameters as types, and then we generate Ansible from it. So we kind of sort of have invented an extra feature that Ansible doesn't have right now. So shoring up those gaps might be helpful.
All right. Understood. Good.
Any more questions? Yeah.
I was just wondering, is it possible to? I was just wondering, is it possible to, if you've got a stack of custom templates, to import it so that it's brought into it all appears in the API?
Yeah. So that's basically what we mean by when we're saying we're moving towards a plan-based approach. The plan is literally an export of the templates into the undercloud Swift. So, and then that plan can be modified multiple times, and then you deploy once it's in the state you're happy with. So yes, that's when the customization can happen. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
All right.
So yeah, if you have any more questions, we are still here after, so feel free to join us. Thank you for being here.
Thanks very much.
I hope you learned something, and yeah, a lot of things going on, so thanks.